Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Working Remotely Now What with Jennifer Engler. I'm very grateful that you all took the time out of these busy and chaotic and uncertain times to join us today for this important conversation about a shift that we're all dealing with. Before we get started with the presentation, I have just a couple of announcements. First, I want to give a thank you to our members and donors of the Alumni Association who make initiatives like these kinds of conversations possible. If you're interested in learning more about the work the Alumni Association does, you can check us out online at umnalumni.org. With the circumstances around COVID-19, we are ramping up our virtual offerings and resources for students, alumni, faculty, staff, and the general public. I've listed out a couple of upcoming events that are happening online that you all might be interested in or want to share with your colleagues. And you can view all of our upcoming events at umnalumni.org/virtual. We'll be adding to the schedule often. Right after today's webinar, we'll be continuing this conversation on Twitter at #UMNCareerChat. So if you're interested in sharing tips or asking other questions, you can join us on Twitter at that hashtag. And at this time, I'm very pleased to introduce our presenter for the day, Jennifer Engler. Jennifer is the Consultant Team Manager from Leadership, Talent, and Development at the Office for Human Resources at the University of Minnesota. She manages a team of 6 consultants who collaborate to develop leaders at all levels and create a thriving workplace culture. Before joining the Leadership, Talent, and Development team, Jennifer served as Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Student Services in the College of Education and Human Development, and has held positions at the university since 1999. Dr. Engler earned a doctorate and MA in clinical psychology from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and her BA in psychology from Macalester College. Very pleased to welcome Jennifer. I'm gonna get her camera and microphone going here. And turn it over to Jennifer now.
Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. I'm very happy to be here with you all today. Welcome to my living room / dining room. I'm really honored to be able to give this presentation because I feel passionately about our need to take care of each other through these difficult times. And it's my hope that what I have to share with you today will help us all do that better with more ease, care, and kindness. Before we get started today, I want to also recognize and express gratitude for all of the essential workers, first responders, and healthcare professionals and researchers working to help us all. I also want to express my immense gratitude for the leadership in our university in President Gable and Dr. Tolar, Dean of the Medical School and Vice President for Clinical Affairs, as well as our state leadership with Governor Walz. There are so many strong leaders to recognize and thank, but especially these leaders for their decisiveness, courage, and humanity. I also want to recognize that many of us both have the gift and the challenge of having multiple people in a household and trying to juggle working from home in the face of caring for young children, trying to homeschool, as well as caring for often older and vulnerable family members. Today's talk is hopefully going to help with your ability to do what you can when you can do it as you navigate the virtual work world of COVID-19. So before we get started, I'd like to give you a chance to see where we're headed in case you have to pop in and out of the webinar like so many of us have to do these days. So we'll start with an overall check-in, see how everybody's feeling, and then talk a little bit about these concepts of resilience and psychological safety, particularly in our current circumstances. And then combining the idea that onboarding to the COVID-19 virtual work world will really help to prevent and reduce 4 common work stressors. And then we'll go through the 5 typical elements of onboarding and how they need to be revisited in this time of the COVID-19 virtual work world because they have changed so drastically. And then it is my hope that we leave enough time for some question and answers from the audience to see what are your specific struggles. So I'd like to start with a poll. This will really give me a sense in these very unprecedented times, surrounded by uncertainty, and all of our human brains really load this uncertainty. Where folks are at, because it's super normal to be feeling a lot of fear and anxiety about all that is unknown at this time. And while I'll provide a lot of resources at the end to help you hopefully stay mentally, emotionally, physically healthy, taking a more holistic approach to your well-being, I think it's good to start the conversation by checking in and just validating how everyone's doing in this moment as things change for us, moment to moment, day to day, hour to hour, as our circumstances are changing so quickly. So if you could go in and with this weather metaphor, go in and take the poll in terms of how you're feeling in this very moment. Give you a few more minutes to respond there. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up and see where folks are at. All right, so it's looking like we don't have too many folks on the ends of kind of all sunshine or completely stormy, kind of more in the middle, partly sunny to mild, maybe a little bit of how today's weather outside feels as spring tries to come near. So that's good, and it makes sense that folks might be feeling more in the middle and maybe kind of moving out to the edges from time to time, at least the stormy edge, but hopefully coming back to middle. It would be super hard to feel all sunshine all the time at this point with where we're at in circumstances. So thank you for that. That's a helpful check-in for me and hopefully for you to see kind of where others are at and for yourself. So moving forward, I really think taking breath at this time super seriously in terms of making sure we're breathing and thinking about our breath in terms of a mantra that I really like, which is that we're trying to stay focused on the present moment and really taking our days breath by breath, hour by hour, and day by day. Getting too much further ahead of ourselves can be a challenge at this time. So focusing on our breath, and particularly with the breath as it relates to the nervous system. All of our nervous systems right now are on a bit of alert just because of all the uncertainty. It's just common for our nervous systems to be trying to pay attention to what's coming next. So I would like to give you the opportunity to just take the next 30 seconds where you are able to do one of three options, which are taking 3 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, making the exhale longer than the inhale. Or if you prefer, just taking 30 seconds of observation time where you're not trying to change your breath, you're just observing it. And your job is, again, just to observe, but to allow yourself a whole 30 seconds to just attend to the breath. Or if there's other things that you already know really help center, ground you, soothe yourself, and provide that overall sense of settling to your body and your nervous system, go ahead and do that. So pick the option that works best for you, and we'll just do that for the next 30 seconds. Okay, hopefully that provided a little bit of a interlude there to your day and your pace and just helped quiet things a bit. So as we move into the content, the next part that will be helpful for me, but hopefully for you all to kind of see who's with you as an audience member, is to identify what role you most resonate with here. So if you could please respond to this poll as to whether your role is primarily someone who does not supervise others and the majority of your work is based on your own individual contributions, whether you produce those in collaboration with others or more by yourself. And if that's the case, then you would choose A, individual contributor, or B, a people leader, as I like to say, where most of your role is to help direct and manage the work of others. Or C, where your role is both, where you feel like it's pretty even split between both the roles of A and B. Or D, you really don't identify with any of these roles. So go ahead and plug in there how you best identify into that poll in terms of roles. Okay, very helpful. Probably about 50 or close to 50% of you are saying individual contributor. and probably another third feeling mostly people leader, and another additional third feeling like probably a nice split between the middle, and then a small number of you really feeling like none of those roles really capture your current set of circumstances. So that's helpful as we move into the content, because as you'll see, we all have a role in the virtual work world of COVID-19, and you can be thinking about your own role as well as the roles of others as we go through talking about the tasks and resources ahead of us. So now I'm going to move into this notion of resilience. There are any number of definitions of resilience that folks use, but I've settled on this one, that resilience is your own capacity to adapt well while helping your teams and departments adapt in the face of stress, change, and uncertainty. It means, quote, bouncing back from difficult circumstances. In the world we find ourselves today, I want to acknowledge that there are many unknowns in the application of this definition. Foremost, each of our individuals' experiences of what is difficult about our current set of circumstances really does vary widely. And second, it's to what and when will we be, quote unquote, bouncing back? That's also very unclear. So given that, I want to put the emphasis on our capacity to adapt. That flexibility and adaptation are likely our greatest keys to resilience at this time. And recently, a wise colleague of mine gave me the metaphor of really going with the flow in the context of imagining ourselves in a river. And instead of trying to cling to the riverbanks of what was, really trying to let that tide carry us as we adapt to the ever-changing set of circumstances, which can be scary for any of us who've ever swam in a body of water with any kind of current. But I think it's kind of that adaptability to let go of the riverbanks and kind of float is what's going to be our best defense to getting stuck in kind of rigidity about the virtual work world of COVID-19, and perhaps not faring with the same amount of resilience that we would want for ourselves. So in terms of building resilience, there's a tool that is often helpful to folks, and that is about really identifying the spheres of control that do or do not exist in your level of control in those. And so discerning that in situations can be helpful in figuring out your influence or impact. So if we focus a lot of our energy worrying about things we ultimately have no control over, cannot influence, this can be really frustrating and stressful, and unfortunately can lead us to ruminate and may even help us become anxious, especially in these times. So as you can see here, just drawing these circles might be helpful, and writing down those things you can control in the innermost circle, and what you might have is some influence or indirect control over in the middle circle, and finally those circumstances you really have no influence or control over. And when you depict them in this way, you could begin to see and focus on those things you can truly impact, and hopefully letting go of the rest. And this brings me back to the importance of the mantra I was talking about earlier, breath by breath, hour by hour, day by day, or one that fits for you personally, that really doesn't allow you yourself to get too far ahead of your own tasks, or those of coworkers or your team, because as circumstances continue to change and evolve, we will need to be focused on staying in the moment and adapting to what is. The spheres of influence and control then allow you to balance and move forward as circumstances change, and adapt to them as they often are changing rapidly. So moving on and talking about our roles a bit more. In this context and spheres of influence and control, a supervisor, you out there who do both supervision and leadership in your roles and try to balance that with also your own contributions, you are in a position to help reduce some of the big sources of work stress. You can reduce the ambiguity by being clear about what you expect and what you do not expect. And we'll be talking a lot about this in detail as we go. And it's here that I want to give a quick shout out to President Gable in terms of how helpful it is when a leader sends you an email that says, I know you have children at home and you're trying to work full time, and I want you to do your best. It's important for us as leaders to explicitly acknowledge each one of our employees' circumstances, make it safe for them to share and talk about them as they change, and do our best to enable them to do their best within the stressors and limitations. You also have the opportunity as a leader to serve as a role model in actively using self-care practices and openly demonstrating how you're managing your own stress and trying to balance the stress of your employees. Moving on to thinking about well-being and self-care, we have a wonderful resource here at the University of Minnesota that many may already be aware of, and that is the Center for Spirituality and Healing. And it's from them that we get this model for well-being. As a supervisor, you want to help your team members and department be resilient, and you can do so best when you tend to your own resilience and through the strategies of self-care. Resilience is actually a competency that can be developed over time. It does require self-awareness, confidence in your strengths, and generally a positive mindset, and practice, practice, practice. I've heard very senior leaders and people who I consider expert in these practices say recently that their own self-care has gone by the wayside, and that's normal in times of crisis. But as we start to level off a little bit and figuring out what this virtual work world will look like, it's certainly very important we all pick those practices back up, because the more you engage in these behaviors, it'll help you be more resilient. The more resilient you'll become in, again, that holistic self-model of self-care. Also recognizing that some other aspects of this model you'll need to lean on when some of those other aspects of well-being, say perhaps security, a sense of security or community, you struggle to work on during these times of social distancing. Then moving on to the role of folks who more identify as an individual contributor, and what can be your role? Well, it's very similar to the role of a leader. It's normal and appropriate, though, to look to our leaders for clarity and structure. Many of them, as I've referred to, are pretty taxed currently, and maybe for quite some time, depending upon how circumstances change. And typically, leaders are leading others through a change in circumstances that they are driving, and thus are ready to help others adapt to what they already anticipated. But at this time, we're all in the same boat, having the same experiences as each other. And sadly, we see this as our leaders are getting sick themselves, supporting sick family members, and sometimes needing to grieve loss. Thus, it's essential that we recognize that this is a two-way street, and that we can be doing this for each other, up, down, and across in our organizations. We're all leaders, and that we can share where we're at, ask for what we need, and share what we're able to do for others. And this is particularly true in taking an active role in building and maintaining psychological safety in our interactions with one another, and in demonstrating our own self-care practices. I just referenced a term called psychological safety, so I'd like to talk more about that. Psychological safety is really defined as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Now, if having every meeting in your home isn't an interpersonal risk, I'm not sure what is. So therefore, it's important to remind people of the concept or introduce them to this notion of psychological safety, where we are essentially trying to build and maintain a sense of trust that we can show up with our true selves and be accepted in the workplace. That each Zoom meeting I attend is a place where my full humanity will be met with care and concern. It's everyone's responsibility to model the behaviors that contribute to the sense of safety. And they are, for one, asking for feedback regularly, checking in with others. Now, asking how you are actually has meaning, and people really need to be able to share how they are. Recently, my boss asked me, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm exhausted." And that probably was one of the first times I was really super honest about how I was doing. Another behavior is acknowledging and admitting your own mistakes. It's important, and I've done this, sharing openly, "Hey, I'm not sleeping well, and I think I forgot to do something that when we met, it was delegated to me, or I took ownership to do, and I'm not sure I did it. Can you help me remember?" Another behavior is for asking for and welcoming different perspectives, recognizing that the way we did work in the real face-to-face work world may not be the best way to do it now in the virtual work world, and asking for and welcoming those different perspectives of how should we approach this work now, how best to get it done. And finally, asking open-ended questions and practicing reflective listening. Now more than ever, slowing down and really listening to one another is so important, because it's more difficult to connect virtually. requires us to listen so much more deeply than we may be accustomed to doing. We can see each other, but all of the cues, all of the nonverbals are much harder, even in Zoom, even when you can see a person's face. By doing these things, this will help your team foster a sense of psychological safety and foster a virtual work environment which is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Now we're going to shift really specifically to talking about onboarding and what are the elements and how are they going to be changing and needing to be revisited here in the COVID virtual work world. So let's start with what is onboarding. It is a process of providing support and resources to help each employee be a fully functioning member of your team. It's a long-term process. It's not an event. It's designed to help everyone become fully functioning. And if you think about it though, and this is really the premise of this entire webinar, we're all onboarding to the virtual work world of COVID-19. There was no plan or leadership for whether, when, and how we would do it. Whereas typically it's a well thought out plan for a transition tailored to a specific level and position of each employee, usually one at a time. So moving on then to what's the difference between orienting and onboarding so we really absorb the full context. The difference is that orientation tends to be an event. It's sometimes a meeting, a couple of meetings, few hours, a couple of days. It's short-lived and focuses on all the logistics and rules and information that you need to have. For most of us, this has been the bulk of the last 2 weeks. Where are we working? What are we needing? Really getting up to speed on the basics. Onboarding, on the other hand, is a process set up to cultivate long-term relationships, promote an understanding of organizational culture, and foster a sense of belonging. Under normal circumstances, onboarding as a process may take anywhere from 6 months to a year to complete, depending upon a specific job. So it's important to recognize because under typical onboarding circumstances, employees are often supported closely by supervisors and peers throughout the process, and again, one at a time. So now we all need to commit to continue this onboarding process with one another as we move forward because it's unclear how long we'll be in the virtual work world, and we're all going through it at the same time without any planning, no one to specifically lead it, and with the uncertainty of when we'll be back to face-to-face work. There are clear benefits to onboarding, and those are here on the slide, proven benefits by research, and we're all in need of these benefits. As I talk to my colleagues across the university and outside of the university, I'm finding a wide continuum of how each of us are doing so far and our ability to feel productive and engaged, or where we're feeling more frustration or disengagement because of some of the key pieces that aren't in place yet. And that's okay, it's early days, but the point is that this will need to be an ongoing commitment and be seen as a longer process. This next slide just shows how some of us might have been feeling, sometimes throughout the last 2 weeks, kind of alone at our desk, feeling like we had nothing to work with, no one around us, no one to give us direction, feeling sometimes a sense of isolation, frustration, and needing support. And this is kind of what we're wanting to avoid in the long term because it can have some significant impacts for all of us. So, starting into the onboarding elements, what will be helpful is for me to get a sense of how supported you are feeling right now, and again, with your immediate supervisor who wasn't planning for this, but who you might have been looking to. So what's your level of agreement of how supported you have felt by your supervisor in your efforts to adapt to the virtual work world you precipitated by COVID-19? Okay, most of you are feeling quite a bit of support, and that's fantastic to see. I think there's been a lot out there in the media, and I've gotten a lot in my inbox about, hey, we're all in this together, and we need to be really working hard at making this transition and taking care of each other. So that's fantastic to see. There are some there, though, who feel like perhaps there's more that could be done, and hopefully moving through some of these elements, it'll help you identify what you can provide for others, because we all have a boss and many of us are bosses, so to speak, and what we can also ask for. So moving on, we're gonna start again with that sense of who's responsible. And as I've mentioned, we all have a role and it's a team effort. All of us are at risk for feeling isolated. So this support can go, as I've said before, in the organization, up, down, and across. We all as individuals have a role in sharing how we're doing and speaking honestly, asking for what we need, and doing that with a sense of trust and safety, providing updates on what we're working on, how it's going, and encouraging others and sharing our strengths where we can work on behalf of others. In order to prevent work stressors, it's helpful to identify what research has found can be the most typical work stressors. And those are the following: role conflict. And this is really when coworkers perceive each other to be kind of what I like to say, moving out of their lane, not staying in their lane of roles and responsibilities. And sometimes it's intended for feeling supportive, but when it's not communicated or discussed in advance, it can often feel threatening. And that role conflict between coworkers can lead to a great amount of stress. The other one is role ambiguity. So when employees are unclear about what their role is and their responsibilities, and fear, especially when they fear they'll be perceived as not doing a good job, that also creates a large amount of stress. And that might be changing as we move into the work world. Some work that was within someone's role or responsibility may not be able to be done right now, or might be on a pause. And so making sure that you're clear about what is your current role and responsibility to reduce, again, that stressor of role ambiguity. And then interpersonal conflict, and that can occur with the role ambiguity that I was talking about, when one employee's efforts inadvertently threaten another employee, and then there's conflict between specific employees or the work that they are both trying to accomplish. And finally, as we've talked quite a bit about, that lack of social support. When it was once easy to connect at the water cooler, in the kitchen, or over lunch, or a walk down the street to the local Target or pharmacy, and now we all need to make intentional efforts to see each other, both socially as well as to get work done. So keep these sources of stress in mind as you consider what elements of onboarding may help alleviate or prevent these work stressors in the virtual work world of COVID-19. So there are 6 key elements for onboarding in a typical onboarding plan. And we're going to talk about how they're different now. So they are communication, resources, compliance, organizational culture, expectations, and relationships. So starting with communication. On your first day, when was it, and how did you learn, and how did you prepare, were you not able to prepare for how this virtual work world was going to occur? How was that even communicated to you? And once you got there, how are you communicating? How was it established that you would be communicating in this virtual work world different than the face-to-face? What's acceptable now, and what's most effective now? And is it based on personal preferences, or is it determined by someone else? We need to make this explicit. Do we all get to choose what we prefer? Does our supervisor determine it? And what sort of communication for what sort of task? A recent colleague was commenting on how for our team meetings, all the video cameras are on, and noticing that for her partner, the default was to have all of the cameras off. Those are the kinds of things that as we move into this work world long term, we really need to be making more clear in terms of how we establish that when it changes, and just be clear about the degree of effectiveness. The next one is resources. Probably many of us are still trying to figure this out. Did we have a computer? Where did we get the computer? Did we have internet? Would the internet support us as well as our children who needed to homeschool, perhaps simultaneously, in addition to a partner that was in the home with us, also trying to be on the internet and do work? What was our skill or comfort with Zoom? Had we ever done any virtual work before? Had we ever done virtual meetings with any kind of technology? Did we have access to all of the files and resources that we needed? I know for my first week, I spent it back-to-back Zoom meetings at my dining room table, and by the end of the week, I could barely walk. I promptly went out to Michael's and bought a standing desk, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm still making similar adjustments. I think those are things that we are working on, I know, at the university, department by department, college, campus, and unit by unit, about what do people need and what's possible. And it's gonna be probably a long-term negotiation as we, again, my son starts school next week, and I'm not even sure if he has everything that he needs. And when I work upstairs and he works in the basement, how will that work? So we will continue to adjust on the resources needed in our family for what we need to accomplish. And being able to talk about that with your supervisor and supervisors asking very specifically about that is super helpful so people feel like they can get back to work. I think another pain point there is printing. It's super hard to print from home, and just even today with trying to find notes to look at as we do this webinar was kind of one of my own personal challenges. So it's a significant element of onboarding that we're all trying to rapidly figure out. The next one's compliance. And this can look really different in a lot of different organizations. You'll see on the slide here I'm referencing an FAQ that we are quickly putting together and updating pretty much daily, if not hour to hour, on the Office of Human Resources website. But it is that set of expectations and figuring out what are the expectations in this virtual work world. Different levels of leadership and the messaging specific to different roles, whether you have a research role or an essential worker role. And all those messages coming from all those different sources, trying to keep track of them, pay attention to them, understand the different timelines, what's closing when do we start this, when can we go there, both in our work lives and our personal lives. So it's really important to check in and make sure that everyone has a common understanding of the communications. Everyone received the communications, and they know, especially if things are changing, how are they changing, when are they changing. And it's best if this isn't all done at once and it's spread over time and there's a consistent and cohesive checking in process for making sure that people feel like they know the rules of the road. It's really easy in these times to be fearful, and that fear can move into work, and that fear of doing it wrong or getting it wrong and somehow suffering consequences that are unintended. So compliance is a big element of onboarding. Next is organizational culture. And organizational culture are the shared assumptions, values, and beliefs that determine how people within a particular organization perceive, think about, and react to each other and events. And psychological safety, as we talked about earlier, is really a core element of organizational culture. And the psychological safety and culture tend to exist to varying degrees. The psychological safety in any culture tend to exist to varying degrees in every organization. So it might be helpful for each of you to assess whether you felt you had psychological safety in your face-to-face work world culture, because it may be difficult to build it in the virtual work world. But it is certainly worth trying, and it is also very important to actively maintain it as you are working in this virtual work world of COVID-19. And there are key things that you can do to maintain and actively work on that psychological safety. And the primary thing is to check in more often and consistently. So if you are not already doing weekly check-ins with each of your employees, for those of you who do have supervisory roles, or as a team, now's the time to start. It's really important more than ever that people are connecting and hearing about what's going on with each other and on their teams and with the work. Another one is checking assumptions. As a rule of thumb, you should be doing more reflecting back on what you think you're hearing and checking for understanding about what you're saying. Because we're all of our reality is really shaped these days by what we're paying attention to, it's pretty easy to make assumptions that are likely inaccurate about what people are thinking and how they're responding and what their actions are accordingly. So really doing a lot of checking in about understanding is helpful in checking assumptions. My favorite in all of these is making what is implicit explicit. How we work in the new virtual work world needs to be explicitly stated, down to most of the tiny details from how we use the Google Calendar to whether the camera needs to be on or off for which type of meetings, and which meetings you can miss, which ones are mandatory if at all possible, and if you can just listen in on a meeting or are expected to be an active participant. All of this needs to be made really clear. And if you don't know, you need to ask a coworker or supervisor, because it only helps all of us really quiet those nervous systems that are already alert to everything else that's uncertain. So anything that can be made certain, instead of just relying on an implicit understanding, it's best in these times to be super explicit about them. And lastly, revisiting your organizational structure and priorities is also important and may need to happen at several points in time. As the work is changing, priorities may be changing, how the work will be accomplished, who will do it, who will be involved broadly in the organization. specific individuals, all needs to be reported out, and communication is key now more than ever. So the last element of onboarding are expectations. And a lot of this gets at expectations, but I think there's been conversation at the university about how to do performance evaluations as we do that typically during this period of time at the end of the year. And it is super important that performance evaluations are always thought about, those ongoing, preferably weekly check-ins to just check cues about performance, and is performance on par. But in particular now, it's very worthwhile for a supervisor to clarify their expectations in terms of how to get work done with at home with a full household, sometimes with children, sometimes with older adults, and to perhaps even revise goals, plans, work projects, figuring out what work is on pause and what work can move forward, and being very specific about that. Continuing these conversations on an ongoing basis is part of an effective performance management process. And now's the time for consistent and frequent communication between supervisors and employees, as well as between colleagues with whom you need to collaborate and accomplish the most important tasks. And finally, our relationships. In our regular face-to-face work world, we are often spending time with our work relationships, our colleagues, sometimes more than we do our own family members and friends. So for an employee to feel connected, they need to maintain the vital interpersonal relationships and networks that were in the face-to-face work world. As a supervisor, it's important for you to provide leadership for how you can best foster a relationship between you and each employee and the team as a whole. Establishing a cadence of ongoing conversations with each employee and for the team, both to get work done and to check in on well-being and changing life circumstances. In addition, each individual employee needs to take responsibility for maintaining relationships up, down, and across the organization. And communication, again, is key for both written emails and Zoom and phone meeting contexts. And finally, you should be thinking about relationships outside of the organization and being explicit again about whose responsibility it is to maintain communication and cultivate and maintain the relationships with those folks, including key partners, stakeholders, and your constituents, customers, or students for us at the university. As you look at these 6 elements, and I'm going to go to the next slide where you can see all 6 lined up there. We're going to ask you, because we've seen a lot of you feel supported, what are the things that have been working well to help you move forward? Those strategies and ideas is the wisdom in the audience today that I'd really like to take the opportunity to share. So if you would now, I know there are many of you, but put in the chat those things that you've been doing in the context of these elements that have been really working well in helping you move forward, stay calm, and find a new groove in the virtual work world that we are all finding ourselves in now. That's great. I'm seeing lots of suggestions. Keep them coming. Lots of wisdom out there, lots of support, and it's super helpful to see what kinds of things people are getting a lot of strength and direction and structure from.
And Jennifer, a lot of these suggestions are just being shared with us directly, so it might be helpful to share a few of them out. But
yes, please do.
A lot of folks are saying having a good team and a good boss helps a lot. Sharing resources and having regular check-ins on Zoom. I love this suggestion. Somebody says they commute to work by taking a walk around the block before and after work.
That's fun, yes.
Daily coffee meeting for 15 minutes via Zoom with the team. A lot of people talking about the importance of clarifying expectations. Lots of good suggestions that we can share with attendees afterwards.
We sure will. That's awesome. Keep them coming. As I move on, I think there's no reason to stop, so just keep them coming and we will share them out. So that's fantastic. So I'm going to move on to the key takeaways that I am hoping one or two is resonates with you, and you can take those with you and share them out and keep doing them. And so where I really start with is that breath. Breathing is key in attending to our nervous system in a time of fear and anxiety. Checking in for yourself around, what's your motivation like today? What's it like this hour? Am I able to focus? How was I able to focus today? How are my motivation and focus related? And what's my level of stress? And really doing those check-ins around self-awareness and resilience, and always remembering to take those breaths, particularly when you check in, motivation's low or focus is low and stress is high. Perfect time to take those breaths. And then this is everyone's responsibility. I think I really beat that one to death, but I just really feel like leaders are important, but we all have a responsibility, because again, there wasn't a plan. We all found ourselves here very rapidly, and we all can do our part. And then the sense of resilience and control, that adaptation, that recognizing what's out of our control and we should really try to put out of our mind, and then adapting to the things that are changing around us and trying to be as flexible as possible. Again, not clinging to the river, the sides of the river to what was, and trying to do as much as we can to foster that psychological safety in each of our interactions, one-on-ones, teams, projects, small groups. And then lastly, onboarding to the virtual work world really does vary by the kind of work you do, the role you have, but really taking some concrete actions to establish these new processes and norms for how you'll do the work, what work can be done and when, checking assumptions and making it explicit. And finally, checking in often, working to be flexible and adaptive, modeling self-care, and always remembering that it's not an event, it's a process, and we're going to likely be in it for quite some time. So keeping this top of mind and not getting, as I like to say, a little lazy with it. So before we jump to Q&A, I want to give you the opportunity to take a break here and give you the opportunity to take a break from my talking and you writing down one thing that you're not doing now, whether it's an idea in the chat that we chatted out or you can see, or just something I said or something that came to mind, but something that if you did on a regular basis would help you be more effective in onboarding to the virtual work world and build resilience for you and your team or department, both you and the team, or just for yourself, whatever resonates for you. To write that down, and in writing it down, it's easier to make that commitment to yourself and remember to do it. So let's take a moment to do that. And some of you may still be writing, but I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. So I'm going to go to the next slide and just show you some resources here. Some of them specific only to the university and university employees, but just as a reminder and encouragement for all of you who are not employed at the university to make sure you're checking with your organization's benefits and human resources for the employee assistance program. Most organizations do have that benefit for employees, and often the EAP programs can meet with employees on issues related both to work as well as personal lives. As I mentioned, we have the FAQ on the website and our HR specific employee questions, and our university health benefits has some well-being resources, again, some pretty common for most organizations. Then we also have this here, as I said before, in reference to Center for Spirituality and Healing, and they've developed, as many organizations have, specific references to the COVID-19. On that page, there are lots of PDFs that are downloadable and free and really wonderful resources. And then the university libraries, Ashley Alexander has really been grabbing resources from all across the university and putting them on this specific page. And again, most of these resources are available to anyone in the public, not just University of Minnesota employees. And again, this PowerPoint, the slides will be available. So if you don't get all these links today, we'll make the slides available to you so you can get those links. So then moving on, I just want to recognize that a lot of the resources I referenced today and concepts do come from our supervisory development webpage, which can be found at supervising.umn.edu. Again, although resources there are also open to the public. So I think we'll turn now to question and answer, and I'll let Marissa field the questions, but go ahead and put those in the question and answer window on Zoom. So Marissa can see those, and then.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Jennifer, for sharing all of that tremendous content with us. I thought it was really relevant and tangible, and I got a bunch of notes here of ideas that I can start implementing today. So as more questions come in, we'll get started. A couple of the first ones have to do with balancing childcare and working at the same time, and some suggestions for being explicit about balancing those expectations with the team, or worried about what other colleagues might say if someone complains that that a coworker isn't pulling their weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great questions. I think they speak to quite a few things. I think that that's why I gave a shout out to President Gable's email, that for all of us with children was really helpful, acknowledging that and acknowledging that her expectation is that we do our best. And I think while that's a broad expectation, I think it is something that we can refer back to give us guidance in talking to our coworkers and our supervisor about what is our best right now, what is possible. Given the circumstances. I think as it also hits on, for me, the psychological safety component. I think if an employee says to me, hey, my first grader starts school on Monday, and the expectation from the school is that at 9 a.m. he's on a Zoom classroom, and we have our standing team meetings at 9 a.m. on Monday mornings, it really behooves the whole team to shift those meetings or figure out if that someone can take minutes, or if she can just try to listen in, or does she establish a buddy system where somebody else takes notes, or she meets with that person afterwards and gets caught up. But I think now is the time to really be adapting to those differing situations, because if it's not childcare, it'll be something else. It'll be a sick relative or, something else. So I think that is what I mean about adaptation and flexibility, that really figuring out how can we adjust? This isn't how we did it in the face-to-face work world, but we all didn't have these circumstances. There was a lot more options before.
Yeah. Thank you for those suggestions. I think the reminder to be explicit about what you need and to recognize that the situation is ever changing, and just because you haven't asked for something as of today doesn't mean it's too late to start asking for it now. We're all still learning. So another question came in, and this is a little bit of a hypothetical, but what do you think, will this become the new normal, this virtual work from home? And what do you think we might be able to take away from the lessons we're starting to learn from this experience?
Yeah, great question. I'm enjoying hearing a lot of thought leaders talk about this in the kind of organizational consulting world. And to be honest with you, what they're saying, and I deeply resonate with, is it's forever changed. What it means, what it looks like, is very hard for any of us to tell, but it is undoubtedly forever changed. I hear people worrying about, how am I ever going to get people to come back to work? I don't have that worry. I don't have that concern. I think it's more the adaptation and flexibility we'll have with one another and work about what work does need to be done face-to-face, what work can be done virtually, how does working virtually work for some people's styles and personalities and not as well for others, or their life circumstances. I just know that it's forever changed. And I tend to try to see that as a silver lining of this, is that perhaps some of those changes were really needed, and it took an event like this to create that opportunity.
I love that perspective. So another attendee writes, our unit is really struggling with boundaries and expectations, and they deal with a lot of emergency situations. Some folks are meeting deadlines, some are constantly bugging other people, and others are really hard to get a hold of. Any advice for this attendee?
Yeah, that sounds like a very difficult situation. And I think I can give an example on our team, and what we're really talking about is if some people have more limitations with small children, children at home, and just difficult getting work done at all, you know, we're going to risk burnout for folks for whom the only time they can get work done is when their children are sleeping. That's going to also be a time that they have just to refresh from that childcare. So taking care of very small children is challenging, just like having emergency responding work is challenging. So what we're trying to do is have the work that can be more project work for the folks who have those limitations, and for those of us who are more capable and in our circumstances to be more client facing, for us to do that work. And so on a team like that, I would try to take inventory of what kind of work the circumstances of each employee allow them to do with a certain amount of ease, as well as some explicit renorming of what are the expectations for communication, not just setting the expectations, but trying to find out what works for everyone. We've established on my team, given that we're all working at different times because of childcare, because of homeschooling, because of older adults that we're taking care of at home, that we have a 24-hour response time now in terms of internal communications. And if we really need each other, our norm is that we text or we just pick up the phone and actually call, which we have all forgotten our phones actually do that someone can answer the phone and we can ask them a quick question. So I think establishing norms is super important, reestablishing them so that everyone knows what are the expectations, what communication norms will work, and for what kind of work, for what kind of employees, under what circumstances. And I know that's a lot of hard work, but there isn't really any way to transfer what worked in the face-to-face world to the virtual world seamlessly.
Couple of questions about collaboration and gathering feedback from colleagues now that we're not able to just pop over and ask a question. Have you seen anything that's worked well so far, or have any ideas of what you and your team might be trying soon to gather insight and feedback from a larger group?
Great question. No, I would say we are in testing period. As I've said, it's early days. I think that's another silver lining I see here is all the opportunity for innovation. But I think the other thing I want to say is that this by nature will slow us all down and slow the work down, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I understand that that has to be met with expectations from leadership, but you know, I have a colleague who's working on development of some programmatic projects, and she needs to check in with her colleagues around what's already going well, what's not going so well, what ideas do you have, which is I think a lot of what collaboration looks like. And she's just needing to set up individual meetings. Sometimes that works depending upon how large the group is, but that's kind of what I mean about slowing down. Yes, when you could pop over and just touch base with someone quick, it was easier to collaborate. And so I think that by nature, that collaboration may slow a bit, and I think that that's okay, at least until we get our sea legs, so to speak, in this virtual work world.
Well, I think that covers all the major themes of the questions that folks had. A couple more folks asked about accessing these resources after the webinar, and the recording and the slides will be made available to everyone who registered for the webinar via email, hopefully later this afternoon. So you can watch out for that in case you want to rewatch anything or share out with others that weren't able to join. And then the last thing I would share is there's a lot of comments coming in thanking you, Jennifer, and saying how useful today's content was. So just again, want to reiterate my thanks to everyone that joined us. All 500 of you, we maxed out our Zoom capacity on this webinar, and to you, Jennifer, and your team for preparing the content. And wishing you all the very best. Stay well, stay healthy, and we look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.